wish you understood my German, because I said twice and I repeated in English without any doubt. My firm confidence in the selection of our pilots, in the training of our pilots, in the qualification of our pilots, in the work of our pilots, has not been touched by this single tragedy.
Intermission's over. Second half of the arena opens for business with a new pair of victims. I say that with a smile and tongue-in-cheek. First up, he covers the media for the Washington Examiner, Eddie Scarry. And to keep us honest in everything, the premier criminal defense lawyer in Massachusetts, we welcome Geoffrey Nathan back to the show. Gentlemen, I thank you both for being here today.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Eddie, I'm going to start with you on the media side of things here, because on the crash in the Alps, some of the media coverage has been, again, and I say this as a member of the media for many, many years, but it has been reprehensible what they have used to describe this. We saw one network, which shall remain nameless because we don't want to outfox ourselves, basically calling this, on a lower third graphic, screams of terror and knocking at death's door. Haven't we really gone a little bit too far when we're starting to use that kind of language when 150 people are dead?
I'm sure that there is probably a lot of that out there. I mean, these kind of stories are the cable news dream, especially over at CNN, where they seem to not be able to get enough of a plane crash. And I mean, speaking of CNN, they showed like this little graphic of a man and knocking on the door, as if that helps explain anything from the cockpit. But yeah, I mean, I think there's really no stopping it, because that's kind of what cable news traffics in. You're going to see a lot of hyperbole, and they really don't let up, especially now after this morning with the recent developments.
But isn't it fair to say, Eddie, that the general public wants this? Because let's face it, it's the old adage, give the people what they want, and many times people do want to be spoken to like this, or they want their news delivered like this. So aren't we in many ways giving the public what they want?
Well, I think that must be it. It seems to work, and that's why they keep doing it. I will say it's interesting. I was speaking to some people who do online news, and they had been covering the crash yesterday when the news broke. But they both had said that the traffic for the stories wasn't really that high, and I could only guess it was because the images hadn't yet come in. And then as of this morning, we saw this new take where apparently the plane was downed by the pilot on purpose, and so there's probably some renewed interest or more interest. But yeah, I mean, it seems to be, especially with CNN, they see their typically on a daily basis their ratings are not really that good, but when you get something like this going on, they spike, and so they stay on it.
Geoffrey, let me get this to you and get your perspective on this, because I have said this, and we've talked about this on the show with other folks as well when it comes down to coverage of the news, that sometimes the American public needs to see the evil in their face. This came down in the beheadings of the individuals overseas, some of the carnage that was held at the Boston Marathon. There are terrible pictures that are out there. Some people will say, we don't want to see that. Others will say, Americans need to see it to understand the real brutality of what goes on around the world today. What do you think? Which side?
Well, I'm on the side, particularly on the terrorism trials, as I've said once before here, that I believe these trials should be militarily based. They should be closed to the general public, because the spread of the carnage and then the spread of the jihadist message and how they go about becoming jihadists, and then how they go about building the bombs and putting this all out in a public trial scenario is deleterious to the national security interests.
Why is that, though, Jeff? Why? Why shouldn't people see? Because if there is evil around them, what's wrong with seeing it and having it basically presented to them in a journalistic or a legal sense?
Because then you get all these wannabe jihadists like wacko pilots who say, well, I can't build a bomb, but I fly a bomb, so I'll just do what's easy to me. I'll take my airplane. If I can't smash it into a building any longer, then I'll just put it into a mountain, because that's easy.
But they do that anyway. They do that anyway, even without having to see something like that. Yeah. So is it really any sort of a dereliction here? I mean,
but for the criminal justice system in the United States Department of Justice not to have the ability to refer mass terrorism trials to a more secretive forum is, in my opinion, not in the public interest, and as a consequence, these trials should be closed to the public. What happens when you're broadcasting this kind of stuff is you feed into the wackos, including the pilots, to enable them to commit their own mass terror.
Let me stop you there 1 sec. Eddie, 15 seconds. Your response?
No, I think that he's probably more suited to talk about this than I am, but I suppose from a media standpoint, a lot of them, they say there should be more transparency. On the other side, you have them saying that it turns into kind of a circus show.
Turns into a circus, if you will. Gentlemen, stand by. We're going to take a break. Come right back with The Arena. Round two in this edition of The Arena. Welcome back. He covers the media for the Washington Examiner, Eddie Scarry, and the premier criminal defense lawyer in Massachusetts, Geoffrey Nathan. All right, Jeff, I'm going to come to you first on this. Let's turn to Bowe Bergdahl now, because the entire nation is talking about this. Here we have people who basically say that we need to have sympathy. As a matter of fact, Brooke Baldwin at CNN's newsroom asks if Bergdahl has gone through enough, having been a prisoner of the Taliban for 5 years, maybe we should feel a little sympathy. Let's listen to what she said.
This is someone who was held, for 5 years by terrorists. Is that not, this is what some say, is that not punishment enough?
All right, Jeff, I throw it to you first. There were those people saying that's punishment enough. Let's leave the poor man alone. What do you think?
Oh, good luck with that argument. That's just not going to fly. And here's why. What happened is it'd be one thing to blame the higher-ups in the command for creating what is called a toxic command climate, which led Bergdahl to leave his post and surrender himself to the enemy. But Bergdahl left a chain of inculpatory evidence, including notes, including mailing his personal belongings to friends, family, and relatives in his home state. He made it very clear that he was surrendering to the enemy because he didn't like the war, and as a consequence, everyone could go hunt for him, and that led to the troops being endangered in the hunt for him. Then the United States government traded 5 higher-level Taliban enemy combatants in exchange for his liberty. So the defense isn't going to get too much sympathy, in my humble opinion, from the military prosecutors who are looking to put him away for the rest of his life.
Eddie, here's something else, too. When it comes down to the story itself, I think we have to, and in the media, we have to point out that whether you feel he deserves sympathy or not, this is a man who voluntarily walked away from his unit, left all of his gear behind, only took a compass. So it's not as if this was an accident. Don't you think that that gets missed a lot in the story when people are talking about sympathy for this guy?
Right. Well, I think what's interesting, and you might have talked about this earlier, I don't know, in the New York Times, when they first reported on this story, at the very bottom of the story, it noted that it's possible he won't get an honorable discharge, and what that could mean for his job prospects. So you're seeing a little bit of that. I was reading in the International Business Times that it asserted that it's unlikely that he's going to get prison time. You see, like you said on CNN, if it was punishment enough that he was held by captors. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it good enough, but I'm not sure where that assumption is coming from. The same thing was on MSNBC this morning. One of the guests said there isn't a real hunger for any prison time. So I guess you're seeing a pattern, at least, where they're saying that prison time isn't an option, or prison time isn't something that we really should be looking at.
I don't know about that. I think there's hunger for prison time from the family of the one individual who died actually going out and searching for him. I tend to think that that's sort of been missed as well, don't you think?
Right, I'm sure a lot of people would say that, particularly the families.
All right, 60 seconds before we take a break. Come back and do some more. I'll get a quick comment from both of you. This comes down to sympathy as well. The guy in the Oklahoma University frat, the University of Oklahoma frat, who basically was seen in the bus talking about hanging an African American, he now says that he apologizes for it and it isn't him. What do you think here, Eddie? We give this guy some sympathy and a break, or we just look back at that video and say, no sympathy here?
Well, I mean, I think the country, I don't know about that particular community, but the country is definitely willing to forgive people in those kind of situations. Otherwise, Al Sharpton wouldn't have a show on TV. But, I mean, you see how in the media the example was kind of used as, racism is still alive. But it wouldn't be news if it happened all the time. This isn't something you would see on TV if it was something really prolific. It was something we kind of accepted as fact in the country. But the fact that you do see it on TV means it is an outlier. So I think it's interesting that it's used as some sort of symbol for an ongoing racism in the country.
20 seconds, Jeff. What do you think? Sympathy and we forgive him?
No, pathetic act of near incitement to riot And as a consequence, it wouldn't surprise me if, in addition to him getting the boot of the university, that the DA's office opens a formal investigation of this chap.
Not only that, but if you're that old and you don't know that people are taking pictures of you and it comes out on cell phone videos, then you need a little education to begin with, which is why a lot of people are not going to forgive him. Stand by, gentlemen. We're going to take a break, come back. The CIA moving forward to focus on a new generation of extremist threats and much more when the arena continues. Once more into the fray of the arena. Welcome back. Covering the media for the Washington Examiner, Eddie Scarry, and one of the best criminal defense lawyers in Massachusetts who never really tells us what he exactly thinks. We have to get him to give us a little bit more of his actual opinion sometimes. Geoffrey Nathan joins us. All right, gentlemen. Jeff, I'm going to start with you on this one. We're hearing news now that the CIA wants to take a lot of their field agents out. They want to replace them with desk jockeys in order to deal with the new terror threats. I don't know about you, but that doesn't make me feel a whole lot safer.
Yeah, well, what they got to do is clean house every once in a while. These are terribly difficult, high-risk jobs that have a fair amount of exhaustion and burnout from them, and the amount of education and training that's required is absolutely incredible. So everyone needs to understand how difficult these jobs are, and then from an investigative capacity, how much brain power is required to stay on top of these wackos. That's the issue.
By the way, Eddie, you live in and around the Washington, D.C. area. Do you feel safer these days more than ever before or less?
You know, I think about that a lot sometimes. I mean, we haven't really seen anything on a grand scale. We did see a couple things where it was a little bit questionable. I think the most recent was where a package was dropped off over by the White House, and they thought that at least they thought it was suspicious. But I mean, it looks like things are, since I've lived here, which is about 4 or 5 years, things have been pretty steady. But I mean, you do question every time there's a major personnel change like the one we're talking about. You wonder if things are going to stay the same or what the ramifications might be.
I want them out there looking every single day. Here comes a good one. The pro-Hillary group HRC Super Volunteers. And Eddie, as a member of the media, this one comes to you first. They say we will be watching, reading, listening, and protesting from the media what they are calling coded sexism against Hillary Clinton. Here are the words they say that they will be looking for if the media uses them against Mrs. Clinton, that they will call sexist: polarizing, calculating, disingenuous, insincere, ambitious, inevitable, entitled, overconfident, secretive, still do anything to win, represents the past, and out of touch. Eddie, we can't write a story anymore about Hillary Clinton. That's it. We're done, right?
Right, I got to tell you, my colleague Beckett Adams at the Examiner, he covers media as well. He's looking into this right now. He interviewed the guy who's in charge of that group because he had heard actually that this was a parody. But he called the guy. Apparently, it's all serious. It's very much in line, I think, with what you're seeing at Media Matters, where they do a lot of the same stuff. That's the liberal organization that's basically a front to defend Hillary from anything that's in the media. So it's a completely serious thing. I don't know. It's not going to be effective because all those terms have been used to describe President Obama or pretty much any figure. So I don't think that there's going to be much attention paid to that.
Jeff, this just sounds like scare tactics from some people basically just trying to throw one into the media here. I don't know if anybody's going to bite on this one.
I'll tell you one thing. I absolutely treasure my old White House pass, okay? And as a former Carter administration employee, I can just tell you that I do not think that Hillary Clinton is qualified to run for president. So however they get rid of her, fine. But enough of her already.
Would you call her polarizing, calculating, or disingenuous, or would that be sexist?
Polarizing is not a sexist thing. That's what she is. She just is not qualified to be president, however you put it, in my opinion.
All right, we only got a minute left. Here comes the last one here. America wants to legalize cannabis. 52% of the country's population thinks that marijuana should be legalized, and Willie Nelson is launching his own brand of weed. To you first, Jeff, is cannabis legalization just inevitable in America?
No, it's not. And here's why. It unfortunately causes too much harm. So it's just not going to happen. A couple more states are going to push it through because they don't want to prosecute amounts under an ounce, which is an amount you can put in your hand. So that's going to happen. But nationally, it's not going to become legal, no.
Eddie, it's going to be terribly entertaining for the media to have to interview people when we know they're stoned, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think in places like Oregon, you see where they have an editor that's specifically there to cover marijuana and like what's going on. You have magazines that are popping up that are all about this. So I can only imagine the side effects of having such a job. But yeah, I guess it'll be fun to read.
Let's face it, when you're inside the Beltway, some of the people may already be under the influence from time to time. Eddie Scarry and Geoffrey Nathan, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us in the arena.
Okay.
All right, take care, guys. Third and final Thursday hour on MidPoint. From the standpoint of veterans who served their country, a deeper look in how they feel about the possible punishment for Bowe Bergdahl. That and more when MidPoint continues.